Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
Welcome back to Pasture Prime Time, where we explore the soil beneath our feet, the stories that shape our food, and the future of land stewardship. This is a show for anyone who believes in agriculture can be more than extraction. It can be a memory, meaning, and momentum towards something better. I'm your host, Neil, and today I'm privileged to have with us Rich Bradbury, a rancher, writer, systems thinker who believes the future of agriculture won't be built with more gadgets, but with grounded tools, good memory, and a clear sense of purpose. Drawing from a lifetime of land and deep study of the forces that shape it, commodity markets, soil collapse, historical precedents, and quiet wisdom of regenerative pioneers like Tom Lasater, Rich actually invites us, not innovates, to think beyond the spreadsheet. And maybe you are inviting us to innovate beyond the spreadsheet as well. Rich also doesn't reject technology. He just asks us who it really serves. His work champions grassroots innovation that strengthens land, livestock, and community, not just for the balance sheet. For Rich, land is legacy, soil signal, and the hardest questions in ranching aren't mechanical or financial. They're about values, trade-offs, and the kind of future we build with every decision. Rich, thanks for taking some time out of your morning this morning. I know I'm catching you on the west coast of America, and I'm sitting on the east coast. I usually like to start these conversations talking about some of the good things that are happening. We hear so much bad and negative, and we can really poke holes in the things that are uneasing us, and we'll certainly get there in this conversation. With some of the items that maybe aren't working as well. But I'd love for you to just share a little bit about some of the things that are working well in agriculture, specifically from your perspective around your operations.
Well, my operation, we couldn't be happier. I'm very fortunate to be where I'm at and to have had my parents and grandparents put in the work to and sort of preserve a tradition. I don't know if it was a lot of it was motivated out of economics and just never having the money to go really intensive agriculture, but then having been introduced to savory in the 80s and that kind of stuff. So I'm very fortunate. I go out and live a pretty quiet pastoral life, I guess. Bucolic. I just learned the scholarly word bucolic, so I got to drop it in and use it. So
I like it.
Yeah, so I'm thankful for being able to spend more time just organically on the ground, organically with the cattle, take my dogs, my kid, and whoever else happens to be around, and really enjoy those types of relationships. I'm going to look up this quote next time you ask the question, but I've been really meditating on this Fred Renza quote that I'll get the quote right, but it's really good. And that's what I think about. So I think I really appreciate your introduction. I think I should just copy that off and give it to anybody else I do a podcast with, because really that was pretty spot on one. And yeah, even some of it surprised me. I didn't know it was that cool. Yeah, no, I really appreciate guys like Tom Lasater and Wiskane and that just took the time to sit and observe and let things sort of unfold and see why it happened. And I think there's a lot of value in that and a lot of peace. And sometimes in the modern world, we get wrapped up in a lot of noise and we miss the signal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Noise is certainly something that happens in agriculture. We get bombarded on many different factors, whether it's governmental, whether it's regulatory, county, state, all the different bureaus that are around, communities, and then our own operations, depending on how big it is. And so maybe you could share a little bit about your operations. You're a rancher. What kind of ranching do you do? Are you cow-calf pair? Do you go to slaughter? Or are you focused on genetics? Just share with our audience a little bit about some of the things that you do.
You wanted? Can I go back real fast? I'm sorry, I
Sure.
don't mean to
Yeah.
hijack your thing. I have this great positive story that happened on a lease that I just took over. I didn't take it over. We're partnering with the guys that own the property, and it's a diverse thing, and we're really trying to make it a regenerative from the ground up. And this is the first year that we've added cattle and are rotating them, and it's going great. But
Hmm.
we had this, it's like a lemons into lemonade story happen, and I think it really speaks to the positiveness and making the right choices and doing it for the right matter. um, 4 years ago we had a fire here called the bootleg, and it burned 650,000 acres, and this place
Mm.
that we're taking the cattle to, were part of it. It didn't burn down into the valley, but it burned the perimeter of it. And so we're really working, the owner's working on putting trees back to it. So they have been cutting and thinning, and now they got to the point where they're planting. Well, with the Trump administration coming on, a lot of the grants that were for that got suspended.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, they'd been growing all these plug trees. So they're all ready to go and put these ponderosas in. And the day came to it, and the money had just disappeared, but the trees were
Hmm.
alive. And so my the guy I leased from, my partner, um, he said, "Well, give me the trees and I'll plant them." He already had the crew all things. They're like, it was this huge bureaucratic nightmare, and it took like 4 days of intense, because it was like right down to the thing. The government was actually going to dispose of the trees, and
Really?
yeah, and so 60,000. And so he really worked with it. They found a way that the government could gift him the trees. The trees, as of yesterday, are all planted. And
Mm.
so when you want to talk about positive things and that happen in agriculture, and I think making the decisions for the right reason, like when he decided to take the trees, there was no money to pay him to plant it. The trees were free, but it was 3 days of intensive labor of like a crew of 20. It was going to be a
Wow.
pretty hefty bill to get all these trees in the ground,
Yeah.
but he made the right decision, and it just sort of holistically was the right decision, and he was rewarded for it in the long term. So he took this huge leap. He was going to be out a lot of money, but within a week, it all worked out all right. But had he not taken the leap, the trees would have been disposed of, and that was not the right thing to do. So he did the right thing and moved on. And so I think that's a positive story. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people right now are in that position where like you just want to give up. Something was taken, or you counted on something to happen, and it didn't happen, and you get discouraged. But really, when you take things down to the very basic levels, the reason that why you're supposed to do it is because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a mentor that always he would we'd go to these really impactful conflict resolution things, and it would be life changing for people. And within a period of 20 days, they just say, and I'm partly like this, probably not as extreme as some of the others, but
Hmm.
they say, "I'm changing my entire life. I'm just gonna give it all up. I'm gonna go do this. This is what my passion is." And they'd get really scared, and he'd say, "You got to just do it and trust that the universe or God is going to direct you, but you have to make that leap." And I found that when I finally decided to come back to ranching is, but there's that on the personal level, but when you get into ranching and agriculture, there's so many leaps into the unknown that you have to make, and that type of courage is really positive. And I think sometimes we lose that our ancestors had that. We honor them and we romanticize them, but they were constantly leaping into the unknown. And just think of I worked with a guy that he was born before the Wright brothers flew a plane,
Mm.
and I was hurt driving cattle with him, and he'd been on planes and everything. But he's like, it's so weird that there was no planes, and then there are planes, and it was just this
Yeah.
crazy story.
Yeah.
And he was old, but he was. I think that's right. Anyways, he was a character, so he'd seen so much. But just think of all the leaps that people had to take: World War I, World War II, and we're sort of in this golden age of technology and abundance, and we're as unhappy as we've ever been. And I'm not unhappy, but there's a lot of people. Like I just did this post on people are bored. Like
Hmm.
it's an epidemic, and it's causing depression, and it's causing mental health because they're so bored. They're like this locked in this infinite scroll, and
Yeah.
I don't have that problem, and I've never really recognized that other people have that problem. But I think maybe that's part of the risk that taking the leap, and people are locked into not taking that leap. Anyways,
Yeah.
uh, wow, that was quite the tangent. I'm sorry. Um,
No, that's great. That's great, Rich. And I think
yeah,
you're right on the money. There's in much of what we do, and I know you're part of the grow community, and that was a leap in itself. And even myself, as I started to engage with the grow community and we started to talk to agriculturalists, there was a bit of leap, when we introduced technology and how is it going to fit in, to benefit. And I think on the other side, and I really value this, if you look to Tom Lasater, you look to some other thought leaders in the ecological improvement space, call it regenerative or sustainable. The trying the new systems to see if we can continue to rebalance our ecosystems and ensure quality of life for the animals that we're raising, or improving the plants that we're growing. Um, it it just takes courage. It takes a little bit of thoughtful courage. Reading, asking 12 questions, getting 14 answers. Sometimes you just have to step out there and then watch. And I really like that. That observational piece is something I think is so missing in agriculture. It's watching and observing, but it also forces us to get outside. It gets us out of our office, out of the computer, and getting to know our land. And that's a piece that I talk to a lot of younger agriculturists about. I myself try to practice that regularly. I just got back from my family farm, and just spending time on the land observing provides lots of feedback on what we can try and maybe where we can have these leaps of faith, knowing that there's probably not going to be as much of a downside as books or people are saying.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really enjoy your posts on LinkedIn. You have a keen way, Rich, of calling it calling a spade, and doing so in a meaningful way to spur on thinking. Maybe you could share, coming off of what's working well in agriculture, and obviously there's some great things happening in your area and your ranch. I'd still love to hear about your operations in a bit here, but what are one or two of those sort of key calling a spade thoughts about the things that aren't working so well in agriculture? I know it's a bit open-ended of a question, but I'm trying to not lead too much and just get your thoughts. You work in a very different spot in Western America than ranchers and farmers in Eastern or even in the Central area. So just love to hear your thoughts and perspectives.
Sometimes when I call a spade, I offend people. So,
That's okay.
but same mentor that taught me about this taking it universe is people don't change until there's some sort of anxiety created.
Mm,
And so sometimes to resolve conflict, you have to get everybody in this state of distress. And sometimes I'll say something, how would you say it? Not that I don't disbelieve it, but maybe I'm pushing a little bit beyond what the boundary of what I want to say
mm,
is that, like, um, I'll say something more emphatically than probably is necessary so I can get people to start thinking and start talking about stuff. And sometimes I will go way overboard in my thinking and then correct. And so there's, I'll give you an example. I've been really studying, and this is a really sensitive subject in the farming community, but not so much in the ranching community. But we do use the same type of chemicals. So,
mm-hmm.
um, oh, now they're talking to me. The weed spray, the parasite, they
Glyphosate?
spray it on corn. This probably with the early morning things. My brain's not quite firing yet.
No
Um,
worries.
Weed spray. What is it called? Um,
Like Like folic? Like, are you talking about the folic spray that
No,
you
the
put in?
base, it's oh, they spray it on corn and soybeans and the oh my gosh, it's the weed spray. Anyways, so they're linking it back to different mental health issues, Alzheimer's, uh, dementia, some types of cancer, um, and it's in our food. Once you get it in, it's especially problematic in cattle. And you want to just say we got to blanket, not use it. Then we have an invasive species,
Yeah.
and so there's this thing where I don't use Poron on my cattle because
Okay.
the theory is it kills the parasite, the kills the stuff that's working in the rumen that's creating the fermentation that's changing the grass into protein and then giving you a good product out the end, and that chemical goes all the way through and kills your microbiome in your soil, which
Yeah.
after 4 years of this experiment, my cattle look the same as everybody else's cattle that get the pour on. And towards the end of the winter, they're all shedding and rubbing their hair and
Mm.
pour on or not pour on. So um, I found that the aesthetics of it's what sells a lot of chemicals that we may or may not need. Because if you think about it, prior to chemicals, cattle, bison, whatever it would be, sheep probably looked pretty bad come fall. And we had um, we love patterns, we love symmetry, and to have a raggedy cow standing out of the field and looking at it, it's not the symmetry that we want to see, even though asymmetry is what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing within 3 or 4 weeks that old fur, that old hair slicks off and it goes away, and they start looking like you want them to uniform. But as humans, we have to mess with that, and we design ways so that we can keep that really shiny coat year round. And it may or may not be part of the process, but I think we do a lot of things in agriculture because we like the aesthetics of it. We like the patterns that it creates, and it makes us feel good, but it doesn't necessarily work in the natural system because natural systems are asymmetry, and they're
Yep.
chaotic and they're chaotic and they're everywhere. And it's not supposed to make sense to our mind. We're supposed to react to it, not make it organized. So, um, but so long story short is we did find that we couldn't manage it all completely without chemicals, but we greatly reduced what the chemicals were prior to when I started on the ranch, but and pretty much are chemical free. But we found in the water district that we had to deal with some toolies because it was hindering the flow of water back and forth, and
Mm.
you could dig them out, and it was cost prohibitive. So we bit the bullet and spot sprayed, and it paid off. And I don't think that the net harm was so great that you can make that blanket statement that you don't need to use those chemicals, or like you have to get rid of them completely.
Yeah.
But they do have their place where they can be used, and probably sparingly, not repeatedly. And it gets into that thing. Our greatest problem is when we find an easy solution like that, we tend to lean into it
Yes.
instead of be cautious of it and not overdo it and practice restraint. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've often said to myself, to some of my farm hands, but to different ranchers and agriculturalists, we can't forget about the science that got us here as we're transitioning to a new ecological system that is maybe more regenerative in nature or just more aligned to the issues. We have created an imbalance in our systems, and now we're just trying to balance it out. And sometimes because of our own behaviors and creation, we need to utilize some chemistry sparingly. It's like taking penicillin for yourself. We don't take it ongoing. We take it for a specific purpose as humans, and then we stop, and our body rebounds. It's got a little bit of that tune up that it needed with penicillin, and the same in certain areas of our fields, pastures. forested areas. So yeah, I think you're spot on there.
I'm sort of interested before you
Yeah.
go to the next question, and maybe this will work into it. I think we struggle with balance because we so often remove ourselves from the equation.
Mm,
We sort of feel like we're this puppet master over these processes, and we drive the tractor, or we ride the horse, or we pay for this to happen, or we put the fence here, and we're somehow controlling it. What actually, that's a terrible way to look at it, because we are part of the process, and the more
yeah.
that we can come into touch with that, we just our observation, we change the process. And so when we think that we're above the whole process and where decisions are somehow superior, that's, I think, when we get hurt. And we can go generations thinking and then
Yeah.
you will have that outlier event that you can't control because you pushed the system too far.
Yeah.
And that's from living outside the system. So as long as you consciously try and keep yourself in that system and realize that you're part of that system, then I look at it as I make nudges in my system. I don't make big, grand changes. I'll nudge it a little bit this way, and I'll watch it and let everything catch up. And sometimes you got to live with the consequences, and you can't like overcorrect if the consequence is bad. You just sort of have to see how the consequence plays out. And I think kind of people have a tendency
Hmm.
not to see how the whole system plays out because it starts to look really bad, and sometimes a natural
Hmm.
system will look really bad before it will rebound. And a lot of people don't have the patience, or I don't think it's lack of patience. I just think that I think it's maybe they don't want to see have the neighbors talking about what their situation looks like and judging them. And they're like, instead of just waiting it out, they'll make it a change so it meets more with the status quo. And they'll never really see what that decision reaped because it might look bad before it gets worse.
Yeah. Ecology is messy in,
Yeah.
in, in what we do. Yeah, I really like that nudging the systems observation. I think that's really good. How many head of cattle do you run, Rich?
400, little
400.
over 400. And so our operation works like this. It's a cow-calf operation. We retail a high percentage of them um, through a company called Desert Mountain Grass Fed Beef. We sell to retail stores in Seattle, Boise, Salt Lake. We were in Denver for a while, but we spent more stuff up into Salt Lake.
Mm,
Boise's always sort of been the central. There's not as great a population center in Boise, but there's a couple Whole Foods. There's
hmm.
a really cool store called the Boise Co-op, and then we have some restaurants in that area. A lot of it goes to Seattle now, and then a considerable bit goes to Salt Lake.
Very nice.
Um, yeah, so we started that we've been doing almost 10 years. Actually, probably in May, we were doing it 10 years. And it's about 3,000 head, about 20 ranchers. It's a co-op. Um, so we do the cow calf, then the calves go California or to Idaho. And then
Okay.
they all end up in Idaho close to the processing plant. But in the winters, they go to California or they go to Idaho and feed on cover crops.
Great.
And so the reason and I I love grass fed. It's been something I made a commitment to do when I moved back to the ranch. So
Hmm.
we sell some cattle through the market that just won't work in any of our programs. But my goal is everything that gets raised on my ranch is going to go in a grass fed program. Um, but my parents, before I moved back from the oil field, they had tried multiple grass fed because we were sick of standing in the stores as a natural beef co-op and talking to customers that are asking, why are you in the feedlot? Why is this not grass fed? What are the nutritional values of this? And it's just a hard. You can only answer the feedlot question so many different ways. And so we started really to see that there was a niche for people that wanted grass fed beef that was like 100% grass fed, no weird language that let them be in the feedlot for 30 days or anything like that. And gentleman called us from Idaho. He said, I think I got it figured out. And the one innovation that he'd figured out is we'd always worked in purely rancher co-ops. Now we work in sort of a hybrid co-op that's ranchers and farmers.
Okay.
And what he'd done is he started working and saying to the farmers, I want you to produce this cover crop so we can graze these grass-fed animal on the cover crop in the winter months. And so as soon as they take their cash crop out, they replant a cover crop. And over the last 10 years, it has just gone crazy. The farmers that are committed to it are doing some really, really diverse plantings. They're timing their plantings. So like they're planting the cover crop just at the right time before the cash crop gets too big. It can grow as soon as they have the cash crop. It's coming up, and they're planting feeder corn and with peas on it, so that it goes up the stalks and just this really solid mix. And then the calves do really great.
Amazing.
And so that was the really big story, and the farmers that did it were doing well, and they were innovating these different ways to grow cover crops. And then this year, the farmers have decided that it's not only economically viable for them to grow the cover crops. Some of our farmer partners are now buying cattle so that they can raise cattle in the program themselves.
Oh, wow.
So just from our farmer partners, we're going to see probably a 1/3 increase in size over the next 2 years because of the cattle that they're bringing on and into the system.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
So, yeah.
And so I know you posted a LinkedIn post that I'm sure you can direct people to, but just really quickly, what's one of the best ways to work as a mixed co-op, farmers and ranchers? I work with rancher co-ops, I work with farmer co-ops, and the like-mindedness. But when you start to get that complexity there, I mean, you mentioned one of the sort of positive takeaways, but on that human aspect side, what are some of the things that really help that co-op, your co-op in particular, gel?
This is a tough one, and most people don't believe it's possible, but we do a consensus-based co-op. Everybody has a vote. Doesn't matter how many cattle you have, how many acres you put in, one vote, and everybody, I mean, really anybody in the group can, and there's precedent for it. That's how the Quakers run their communities. It's a consensus-based community. Now, I think there is a certain size in our former co-op. We got up to around 200, 300 people at any given time. And it gets really difficult because it's just such an unorthodox, anti-Robert Rules of Order, anti-bylaws way of going about doing business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But what we found is the consensus basis makes everybody go slow and built real trust in the decisions that are being made. And we've found that nice balance between, like, you make the decision, but at the same time, the day-to-day business, you can't make every business decision. So you have to get people in positions that can make good decisions. You have to give them the trust to do that. When I talk about consensus, I'm talking about the big sort of beachfront moments that you have to make the big decisions on. Like one of our watershed moments was like when we said, no, we're not going to do potatoes, we're not going to do radishes, we're not going to do tubers, because it muddies the waters too much to the consumer. You start having to explain, well, why is there a sweet potato in my mix? Why does that GMO sweet potato in the mix? And why are you calling it grass fed if you're feeding it potatoes? So, and it was one of the early, probably 2 years into the co-op, it was one of the early things that we talked about, because it would have been a lot easier just to be able to plant cover crops with the radishes and the turnips and the potatoes and everything in it. And we decided not to because we decided in the long run it would be harder to explain to the company. And then as the labeling changed, we were able to say definitively we're 100% grass fed. And that really doesn't mean anything, but because we've been building a relationship with our customers, they actually have seen enough video, enough social media, enough of them been exposed to us and the farmers that they know that when we say we're 100% grass fed, that we are 100% grass fed.
Amazing.
So,
yeah,
I don't know. Did that answer your question?
No, I mean it does. Provides a model, and it reminds me a little bit of the Grow community in terms of its sort of DAO, decentralized autonomous organization thinking, which is a consensus-based model of everyone has a vote when we have propositions put forward, and we empower community members like yourself, to share ideas and information and weigh in on opportunities. One of the interesting things, and I kind of want to pull a thread on this, is as you're working with building that consumer confidence, and that's an area that I have been talking a lot more about lately. I've been spending a lot of time on trying to make the farmer the hero of the story again in the work that I do from field to consumer. But how do we drive consumer confidence? Engagement in conversation is one thing, but do you think, are they interested in QR codes? Are they interested in terms of understanding where their food comes from? Why, what makes grass-fed different from somebody who's just saying it's grass fed, if they can see what the animals are being fed and some of that information. But in short, what I'm trying to ask is, what's going to help drive that consumer confidence in a greater capacity?
I think it's actually like one of our most powerful tools, and it has been a powerful tool since we were in the natural beef co-op in the 80s, is the in-store visitation.
Mm.
So one of the requirements in the Country Natural Beef Co-op was that you had to be in a store 2 times a year. And the stores sort of just naturally grew with the size of the co-op. So when we were up to 200 ranchers, we were as far flung as Texas and Denver and Minneapolis. So it was sort of a challenge to get some of the ranchers to those stores, but you have to go and physically be in person with. And you have to hear the guys that are vegetarians or vegans who are perfectly good people and they like to poke at you a little bit, but they will stand there and engage in a conversation with you and not be judgmental. Mm-hmm. And so I think, and then my other thing is I get out whenever I can. I go to regenerative, there's not as many producers at a regenerative conference as you would think. There is a lot of people that are very into the idea of regenerative and trying to find their niche in that space.
Yeah.
And I think when you go to those events and because I'm so dialed in on LinkedIn with the regenerative community, I know that in any given time in any state, you can probably go to a regenerative conference nearly every month if you wanted to. If you want to make the time to travel there, you can go meet one of your customers. You can go and visit with them. You can sit at a table with them. You can be in a breakout group with them, and that really builds trust. My big trip was I'm going to do a Western Law Conference, which isn't really regenerative, but probably later in the year I'll probably do a couple regeneratives. This year in March, I went and did the Ag Tech Summit in San Francisco, which was mind-boggling because those people are also in agriculture, but very few of them have ever spent much time on a farm. So to be the guy in the cowboy hat in downtown San Francisco representing ranchers at an Ag Tech Summit where they're supposedly trying to figure out ways to make your life better is surreal at most. So, and then you realize how many people are in agriculture that really never touch what we consider agriculture. They never get their hands in the soil. They wear nice suits. They care about fancy bags. And they're in agriculture just like you and I, but they are so many levels up that, they're not, their manicures are never going to be in the dirt. And I'm not saying defamatory things about it, but until I went to San Francisco, I didn't really realize how many of those people there were.
Right.
And their passion isn't any less than mine. It's just it's in a different direction on a different thing, and they're very committed to what they're doing. So it's an interesting paradigm.
Yep.
So I guess what I take away from that, and I'll make it short, is I think the best thing about getting out and visiting with people, that not only does it create authenticity with you, but it helps you understand where they're coming from, and it helps you make those better decisions. Because I mean, really, I think one of the things that people in agriculture always try to figure out, what is the customer thinking, and like, why
Mm-hmm.
don't they come along with us? And you can't do that in a bubble. You can't do that if you isolate yourself.
Yep. I fully agree with that. I think it's one of the things I've really appreciated about agriculture in my career is the community. You're not alone as much as you feel alone. You just have to ask. But it's going back to where you started. It's taking that leap of faith. I mean, it takes a leap sometimes to ask for help, or it takes a leap of faith to start engaging in some of these conferences or some of these different communities out there. Maybe you can speak a little bit to the grow community and sort of your thoughts around that.
Well, I got into. I think finally bought my node in like January, maybe, or I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was around there. Yeah.
I was super into it, and then life happened, and I had another business that was ran off the rails, and I couldn't stay up with it, and so um, it has been a really unique experience. I'm so glad that I got into it. It made me sort of look at things different. Um, but then the other thing that I see I just find the crypto world, and I think it's a terrible name, crypto. It's
Mm-hmm.
not very inviting. Um, they're there just like the ag tech people. I know they're ranchers, farmers, consumers. Everybody's in this great community because they want to have the right thing to happen. But we're on this path with no. It's like we didn't bring our sex in or something. We're just sort of. I think we have a general direction where we want to go. Like, we're following the sun, but at night maybe we get a little bit distracted.
Yep.
I think I really struggle with the difference between since I have a finance degree, I read a lot of economics. Um, this new frontier that we're emerging on breaks so many of those rules, or it disrupts so many of those rules.
Yeah.
And I've been working on this big piece about it. I just think that it has to happen.
Yep.
And my focus is agriculture. Grow's focus is agriculture. I like the people that are in Grow. Um, so I think the direction's correct, even if I don't agree with all the economics of it. But I can't say that I understand what the economics of it are, and I'm not sure that anybody completely does. But I do know when you break stuff down to basic level, and this is one of the things I liked about Grow, is it always comes from uh, something physical.
Mm-hmm.
All wealth is derived from land.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing more efficient at harvesting wealth from land and replacing that than agriculture. As far flung and as far off course as we are in some of it, it can really be much more simple. It can be much more healthy. It can be much more so. And I think that is Grow's vision, because, I mean, the people that are in Grow that I've seen are truly innovative and really have the customer's best health, best interest at heart, and best mental health at heart. And so,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like when my parents took a leap and they started a natural beef company in the 80s with 12 other ranchers and didn't sell a single beef for 3 years. And they had to fight over who got to haul it to the processor because it was so momentous of a moment for them. Um, it takes that kind of work to get these things up. And I think regardless of what happens with grow, the community will live on. It may become different nodes and do different things, but whatever happened was well worth the investment just to be on the ride. And I've been distracted from the ride because I do too many things. But as things are slowing down and we're turned out, yeah, I hope to get back caught up on everything I missed over the last couple months and get back into
Amazing.
Learning.
Yeah.
So no, I really feel that we're on this change in the way that we go about commerce in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty obvious if you watch the Big Beautiful Bill, if you watch different economies struggling all over the world, this system is not working.
Mm-hmm.
But this system is not capitalism. And a pure form of capitalism isn't always the best thing, but neither is the alternative. So we're going to see something that we've never seen before, and it'll be interesting to see what it was. But I think from the very intent, the blockchain and Bitcoin and the founders of those fundamental platform technologies, every choice they made was to provide the user with freedom. And that's a good place to start from.
Yeah.
And just my favorite little factoid to throw in is the root of capital is cattle. They're movable, they're fungible, they're liquid. They create more. It's a lot like grow. You buy a node, it creates more coins, or tokens, if I'm not using the right word. Anyways, Cal works very much in the same way. So I always remember that everything that we build on comes from systems that we designed in agriculture. And so if you're going to be in this space, well, it's pretty good to be aligned with one in agriculture because it's the base of where everything happens.
I love that. The root of capital is cattle. I've never heard that before. I'm going to have to pull that into some of my dialogue and give you credit for that, but that's a good one. That's great. What, just really quickly here, I'd love to get your take on the word decentralized. It's a term that it turns people's heads. People don't quite understand it. And I really like your perspectives and the way you think about things. And so I'd love to hear what you think about the word decentralized.
It's asymmetric.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is so hard to break out of symmetric systems, and our entire bureaucracy, probably Canada's it's this symmetric hierarchical system. It's not flat.
Yeah.
What we've always found is we don't use words like decentralized or disruptive, because when you live in an asymmetric thing, it just is what it is. Disruption is part of the process. Decentralization is part of the process. Like if you think of a grove of aspens in Colorado, there's one that was the original one. And then it's this massive organization, and it grows in a general circle. So it has some chaotic sort of Mandelbrot set patterns to it, but it's very fractal in the way that it grows out. So you can tell if you're flying over it that this one organization grew into this big circle, but you wouldn't say that one aspen is the central point of it, because when it does finally come back around and go out into this 6 mile wide circle, then there is no center. It's completely holistic and continuous. And I guess everything has little anchors. I don't think it's centralized or anything. Like if you study low stress animal livestock handling, there are cattle that have more influence over the herd than others. So if you nudge those cattle, it'll move the rest of their herd. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're centralized. So, and there's multiple animals that can fill that role. And the network effect is that a good network is there is no one node that will control everything. In a good network, the node can be knocked out, and the network will remain. So,
Yeah.
disruptive, decentralized. I think that there are words that we use to talk about uncomfortable things that we know we should probably be doing anyways.
Very well put. Very well put. Well, Rich, I know it's early in the morning here. I usually try to keep these conversations about 45 minutes, and we're sort of on that mark there. As I always do, I like to sort of pass the floor over and allow you to just talk about anything that might be happening in your community with some of the businesses, some of the 6 million things that you have got your fire stick into, from water district to your co-op to your ranching operation. But anything you would love to share with the grow community, and then, of course, any of the listeners that are listening to this outside of our community.
So I live in a little town in southeastern Oregon, and it struggles. It used to be a mining town. It's a ranch town, and in real estate and in ranching, I'm very encouraged by the people that take the leap and get into agriculture and figure out how to make it happen, or come to these small rural towns. And I just, you got me on the boredom thing. The guy that was talking about this boredom epidemic, and
Mm-hmm.
that seems completely unnecessary. And I feel bad for everybody that's. And when he talks about it, he talks like it's a majority of the people. And um, these rural areas out here are just starving for interjection of new ideas and new people. And it doesn't, in rural America, it doesn't take what it financially, it doesn't take to live in these places like um, it does in a big central city. And we could tie it back into centralized and decentralized. There's an informal bartering and way about trading labor out here that's not centralized. So you think you're coming out here, you're going to get that one job, and that's going to be what supports you, and you can't make the decision because no way that one job could create you. But nobody in rural America has one job,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have one set. They don't have one support system. What you do is you hustle. You develop multiple support systems. You develop the lifestyle that you feel comfortable in, and then you're not bored.
Yeah.
So that sort of ties that around. And then, so I would really encourage, if anybody's bored, if they're dissatisfied, you can, and this is something I can, I'm getting older, so it's not necessarily true anymore. When you're younger, you could go do anything you want. And if it's not working for you, you could go jump back into that corporate job and you're going to be all right. Don't listen to everybody.
Yeah.
But just maybe you might find a little bit more meaning and a little bit better lifestyle and less boredom if you take a leap and come to these rural areas and interject yourself, whether it's timber, mining, farming, ranching. There is a myriad of labor, and it's not hard labor. It's rewarding labor that you can dive into, and you might just change the trajectory of the quality of your life and be happy that you did it. It takes a couple years to slow down, get your heart rate down, get out of having that structure that urban areas impose on you. But I think when you find that it'll be that you're going to find a little bit of, I don't like to use the word happiness, but you'll find a little bit of contentment, happiness, and maybe a place that is comfortable for you to be. And I got to share this Provenza quote. This has been stuck in my head, so I found it and I wanted to share it.
Great.
So you have to bear with me. Oh, give me a second. Oh, we don't manage complex systems. We participate in them. That change is what we call time, and relationship is what we call space. And I think if people meditate on that, we're not the centralized thing of a system. Systems are really complex, and
Yeah.
yeah, change is time, and relationship is it's just crazy. Space, relationships, space. It's such a profound statement. So I've been really going in and reading Provenza's book, Nourishment. It's really good. Anyways, Neil, I really appreciate it. Sorry, I have a big mouth and I talk a lot.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Rich. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day here. And for all the listeners, we'll catch you on the next podcast.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.